My brother opened the front door before I even knocked. He looked at me, then past me at the driveway, then back at my face. "You actually came," he said. "Not I'm glad you're here. Not happy Thanksgiving." Just that flat, almost disappointed observation. Like I had shown up to the wrong party. Like my presence was an inconvenience he hadn't fully prepared for. I smiled anyway. I had driven 4 hours. I was holding a casserole dish, a bottle of wine, and a bag of gifts I had spent 3 weekends picking out. "Of course I came," I said. "It's Thanksgiving." He stepped aside just enough for me to squeeze through. He didn't take anything from my hands. "My name is Rachel. I am 31 years old. I am a project manager at a logistics firm in Charlotte, and I have been the financial backbone of my family since I was 24 years old. I did not choose this role. It was assigned to me the way a job is assigned to the newest person in the office. Quietly, without a formal conversation, just a slow accumulation of tasks until one day you look up and realize you are the only one doing any work. My mother was in the kitchen. She was stirring something on the stove with one hand and scrolling her phone with the other. She did not look up when I walked in. "Put the dish on the counter," she said, "and don't set the wine near the good glasses. Your brother's girlfriend is coming and she tends to knock things over." "It's good to see you too, Mom," I said. She made a small sound. Not agreement, not warmth. Just acknowledgement that I had spoken. My father was in the living room in his recliner. The football game was loud. I walked to the doorway and waved. He lifted 2 fingers off the armrest without looking at me. That was my hello. 2 fingers, slightly raised, eyes never leaving the screen. I stood in the entrance of my childhood home, surrounded by the smell of my mother's cooking and the sound of my father's game, and I thought about the drive. 4 hours. I had left at 7 in the morning to beat traffic. I had stopped once for gas and coffee. I had called my mother when I hit the state line to tell her I was close. She had said, "Okay, the potatoes need another 20 minutes anyway," and hung up. I set my things down and went to find somewhere to sit. My brother's name is Derek. He is 28 years old. He has never held a job for longer than 8 months. He has a music production hobby that has produced 0 income in 6 years, but has required an enormous amount of equipment that I have mostly paid for. He has a girlfriend named Cassie who is perfectly pleasant and entirely unaware that the apartment they share, or rather, the security deposit and first 3 months of rent, was funded by me. I didn't pay for it because anyone asked me directly. No one in my family ever asks directly. The ask always comes wrapped in a crisis. Derek had called me 2 years ago saying his landlord was evicting him, that he had nowhere to go, that he would be sleeping in his car. Mom had gotten on the phone and said, "Rachel, you know how sensitive he is. He won't survive something like this. He doesn't have your strength." I had transferred $4,000 before the end of the phone call. I didn't hear a thank you for 11 days, and when it finally came, it was a text that said, "Got the place. It's cool." The pattern started when I was 24. My first real job, my first real paycheck. My mother called and said the water heater had burst and they couldn't cover the replacement, $600. I sent it within the hour. I felt proud. I felt useful. I felt like an adult who could help. What I didn't understand at 24 was that helping once to a family like mine is not a gesture. It is a contract. It is an agreement that you will continue helping, indefinitely, on demand, without complaint, because you have now established that you have money and they have needs, and as long as both of those things remain true, the requests will not stop. They did not stop. Over the years, I paid for my father's truck repair when he said he would lose his job without transportation. I paid for my mother's dental work twice. I paid for Derek's community college enrollment fee for a semester he dropped out of after 6 weeks. I paid the electric bill 4 separate times because my parents said the company was threatening to shut it off. I paid for my grandmother's birthday party because my mother said Derek couldn't contribute, and my father said he was short that month. Once, about 3 years ago, I made myself sit down and actually look at the numbers. I went through 2 years of bank statements. I highlighted every transfer, every Venmo, every bill I had paid directly on their behalf. When I added it up, I closed the laptop and did not open it again for a week. I did not want to see the number. The number felt like a verdict. My salary was good. It was not extraordinary. I worked 60 hours a week. I had a small apartment in Charlotte with a parking spot that cost extra and a commute that took 40 minutes on a good day. I ate lunch at my desk. I had not taken a real vacation in 3 years, because every time I saved enough to book something, a crisis arrived. I kept thinking it would change. I kept thinking that eventually my parents would get on steadier ground, that Derek would find something that worked, that the emergencies would slow down. I told myself that this was a season, a rough patch for everyone, and that when it passed, they would look back and understand what I had given up to keep them afloat. I was still waiting for that day when I drove to Thanksgiving. Dinner was at 4. By 3:30, everyone was seated at the table. My parents, Derek, Cassie, and me. My mother had cooked a real spread. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, rolls. It looked like the kind of Thanksgiving you see in a catalog. I had barely touched my food when my father cleared his throat. "So," he said, cutting into the turkey like he was chairing a meeting. "Derek's been talking to his guy about the recording equipment, the good console, the one that would actually let him produce properly." I moved a piece of turkey around my plate. "It's a significant investment," my mother added. She did not look at me. She set it to the centerpiece. But it would be a real turning point for him. Derek was eating rolls and staring at his plate. "How much?" I asked. My voice came out quieter than I intended. 14,000, my father said, "but it's professional grade. It holds its value." I put my fork down. $14,000. Set at the Thanksgiving dinner table between the stuffing and the gravy, as if it were a request to pass the salt. "I can't do that," I said. The table went quiet. My mother looked up from her plate for the first time since we sat down. My father lowered his fork. Derek finally stopped eating. "We're not asking you to pay for all of it," Mom said. Her voice had shifted into the tone she used when she was managing me. The soft, patient tone made me feel like a child being reasoned with. "Just a significant portion. Derek would cover the rest." "With what?" I asked. Derek looked at me. "I've got some saved." "You have $300 saved, Derek. I know, because you told me last month when you asked me to cover your insurance payment." Cassie reached for her wine and looked out the window. "Rachel," my father said. His voice carried a warning. "Don't embarrass your brother." "I'm not embarrassing him. I'm saying that I can't spend $14,000 on recording equipment. I can't spend any amount on recording equipment. I have my own rent. I have my own car payment. I have been covering bills in this house for 7 years, and I am telling you, calmly, that I do not have $14,000 to give." My mother sighed. It was a long, theatrical sigh that I had heard my entire life, the sigh that meant you were being difficult. No one said anything about giving. It would be an investment in your brother's future. An investment implies a return. "Rachel." My father's voice was sharp now. He pointed at me with his fork. "You have a good job. You always have. We are proud of you for that. But this family takes care of each other. Derek took care of you when you were growing up. We all sacrificed." I looked at him. "What sacrifice specifically are we talking about?" "We raised you." "Yes, that is what parents do." The silence that fell over the table was a different kind of silence. It was not uncomfortable. It was stunned. No one in this family in my entire 31 years had ever pushed back on that statement. "We raised you" was the conversation ender, the trump card, the debt that could never be repaid and therefore justified every request that came after it. "I'm not doing it," I said. I picked up my fork and went back to eating. "I'm sorry, but no." My mother stood up and walked to the kitchen without a word. Derek muttered something under his breath. My father stared at me for a long moment, then turned back to his turkey. Cassie offered me the rolls. I took one. They did not bring it up again at dinner. But the temperature in the room stayed cold for the rest of the evening. When I offered to help clean up, my mother said she had it. When I tried to tell my father about a project at work, he nodded without listening. When Derek and Cassie left early, he hugged my parents for a long time and walked past me with a quick, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. I drove home that night thinking I had finally done it. I had said no. I had survived it. I was fine. I was not prepared for what came next. 3 days later, there was a knock at my apartment door on a Wednesday evening. I was on my couch in sweatpants watching television. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach drop. My mother, my father, Derek. They were dressed nicely. My mother was holding a paper bag from a bakery I recognized from back home. They looked pleasant, calm. My father had his hands in his jacket pockets and he was actually smiling. I opened the door. "Sweetheart," my mother said, stepping forward to hug me before I had fully registered what was happening. She was warm, soft, smelling like her familiar perfume. "We missed you. Can we come in?" They filed into my apartment. My mother handed me the bakery bag. It was my favorite apple cake, the kind she only made for birthdays, and said, "We felt terrible about Thanksgiving. It got so tense." That's not what the holidays are supposed to be. My father was looking around the apartment with what appeared to be genuine interest. "Nice place," he said. "You've done well here." Derek sat down on my couch. "Yeah, it looks really good in here, Rack." I stood in the middle of my living room holding the apple cake and watching my family be the family I had spent my whole life hoping they would be. Warm, present. Here because they wanted to be. "We just want to make things right," my mother said. She sat down and folded her hands. "We pushed too hard. Your father and I talked, and we know we ask a lot of you. You work hard. You deserve better than what happened at that table." My father sat down next to her. "We are proud of you," he said. "I mean that, and I was out of line. You don't owe us that money. Derek will figure something else out." Derek nodded slowly. "Yeah, totally. It was a lot to ask. I'll find another way." I sat down across from them. I wanted to cry. I wanted to believe every single word. Some part of me, the part that had been waiting for this conversation since I was 24 years old, was already softening. We talked for 2 hours. My mother asked about my job. Really, asked. Listened to my answers. My father laughed at something I said. Derek showed me a track he'd been working on from his phone, just because, not because he wanted funding. Cassie had sent a text that just said, "Hi, hope you're okay. Sorry about T-Day." By the time they stood up to leave, I felt something looser in my chest, like a knot that had been there so long I'd forgotten it was a knot. "We should do this more often," my mother said, buttoning her coat. "Just visit, no agenda." "I'd really like that," I said. My father hugged me at the door. A real hug, arms around me, the kind I remembered from when I was small. "Love you, kid," he said. I closed the door and leaned against it and genuinely felt, for the first time in years, like maybe I had a family. I was still standing there when I heard them in the hallway. My building has thin walls. The hallway outside my door carries sound the way a cup pressed against a wall carries sound. I don't know if they forgot how close they were, or if they simply didn't care. But I heard my mother's voice, clear and light, the way her voice gets when she's relaxed and comfortable. "Told you," she said. She just needed to feel heard. My father laughed. An actual full laugh. She looked so relieved. "Did you see her face when you brought the cake?" "I know her," my mother said. "She always comes back around. She just needs the drama to run its course." Derek's voice, "So do we ask her now or wait until after New Year's?" "After," my father said. "Give it a few weeks. Let her think this was all her idea. Then we bring up the equipment again. Start lower, maybe 8,000. She'll negotiate herself up. She's going to pay for it," my mother said. Her voice was fond and certain the way someone sounds when they're talking about something they've done many times before and expect to do many times again. She always does. You know, Rachel. I stood completely still. I don't know for how long. The sound of the elevator arriving and then leaving registered somewhere distant, like noise from another room. I stood still until the hallway was quiet, and my legs started to ache, and I realized I was pressing both palms flat against the door. She always does. I walked to my kitchen. I filled a glass of water. I drank it slowly, standing at the sink. I looked at the apple cake on the counter in its white paper bag. The bakery was 45 minutes from their house. My mother had driven 45 minutes to a specific bakery to buy my specific favorite cake because she knew it would disarm me. She had done the math on my sentimentality. I wasn't sad. I want to be clear about that. I was not sad. I was something colder and more precise. I was certain. I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop. I opened my bank's website. I went through every recurring transfer, every saved payment, every automatic bill connected to my account. My parents' internet bill, $49 a month. I had set that up 2 years ago when they said they couldn't afford it. Cancel. The payment toward my father's truck loan. $220 a month. I had been quietly covering it for 14 months. Cancel. The subscription box my mother loved, the one with the skincare products she said she couldn't live without. $43 a month. Cancel. Derek's phone line, still on my family plan. I called the carrier and had it removed. I had been paying for his phone for 4 years. The storage unit my parents rented for the furniture they couldn't fit in the house after they redecorated. The redecorating I had partially funded. I called the facility the next morning and removed my credit card from the account. It took me less than an hour. 7 years of financial support unwound in 55 minutes on a Tuesday night. Then I picked up my phone. No long message. No explanation. No farewell letter. I was not going to give them text messages to screenshot and show the extended family as evidence of my cruelty. I went to my contacts and I blocked my mother's number, my father's number, and Derek's number. I blocked them on every platform. I built the wall cleanly and without drama, the way you close a bank account you no longer need. I slept that night, deeply and completely, which surprised me. The consequences arrived over the next week the way dominoes fall. One, then a pause, then the next, then faster. I got an email notification that a linked card had been declined at a restaurant. I got a voicemail, which I did not listen to, from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be my aunt passing along a message because my mother couldn't reach me. I got a text from Derek from a new number that just said, "This is really mature, Rachel. Thanks a lot." I did not respond to any of it. What I did instead was open a savings account I called simply, in the memo, mine. I put the first payment into it the following payday. It was the exact amount I had been sending my parents every month on average for the past 3 years. The amount sat there in the account, not going anywhere. It was a strange, disorienting feeling, like a river that had always flowed in one direction, suddenly running the other way. I'm going to be honest. There were hard nights. There was a Thursday around week 2 when I sat in my car in the parking garage at work and cried for about 10 minutes. Not because I missed them exactly, because I was grieving the family I had been certain for so long was going to eventually show up. The one who would someday say, "We see you. We know what you've given. We love you for who you are, not for what you pay." I cried for that family, the imaginary one. And then I went upstairs and got back to work. The one person I called was my mother's cousin, Diane. She was estranged from that side of the family and had been for almost 15 years. I had always liked her but had kept my distance because my parents spoke about her as though she had committed a crime. They called her selfish, ungrateful, cold. She had simply stopped participating in the family's financial chaos at some point and built a separate life. I called her on a Saturday morning. She answered on the second ring. "Rachel," she said, like she'd been half expecting to hear from me. "How are you?" I cut them off, I said. All of them. A pause. "Good," she said. "That's it? Just good. What do you want me to say?" "I'm relieved. I've been watching you since you were in your mid-20s, sending money you didn't have to spare for people who treated it like a right. I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place, but yes. Good." I told her what I had heard in the hallway. Every word. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The cake was a nice touch," she said, and there was something dry and sad in her voice. "Your mother is very good at this. She really is. It's not personal, Rachel. I know that doesn't make it feel better. But the way they operate, it's not about disliking you. You are genuinely their favorite. You're just their favorite resource. You're the one they chose to rely on because you were the most reliable. In a different family, that would be a compliment. In this family, it was a trap." "Yes," she said. "It was." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about her own version of the exit, years earlier. The flying phone calls from relatives calling her heartless. The family gathering she was uninvited from for 3 consecutive years. The way it slowly, quietly became easier. She told me she had a good life now. She meant it. I could hear it in the pace of her voice, the ease of it. Before we hung up, she said, "I'm going to come visit you, if that's okay. I want to meet you properly, the real you, not the one I see at the mandatory Christmas dinners." "I'd really like that," I said. She came 2 weeks later on a Saturday. She drove 3 hours and showed up with a cast iron pot full of chicken stew, a 6-pack of decent beer, and absolutely zero agenda. She sat on my kitchen floor and played with my cat for 20 minutes before we even started talking. She asked about my job, my friends, whether I was sleeping okay, what shows I was watching. Not one question about my parents or Derek or money or any of it, unless I brought it up. We ate the stew at my kitchen table. It was dark outside and warm inside, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time, which was simply comfortable, not performing, not calculating, not quietly bracing for the moment the real reason for the visit would surface. Before she left, she handed me an envelope. I pulled back immediately. "No, I don't want money." "I know," she said. "Open it." It was a card with a picture of two women walking on a beach, backs to the camera. Inside, she had written, "You are not too much. You are not too little. You are exactly enough for the right people. I'm glad you're one of mine. Diane." No check. No transaction. Just words she meant. I stood at my door and held the card and felt something release in my chest that I hadn't known was still clenched. The next months were the strangest and quietest of my adult life. I got a message through a cousin that my parents were struggling without the support. I did not respond. I heard through the same channel that Derek had found a part-time job, his first in years, mixing audio at a local venue. I felt something complicated about that, a mixture of gladness and grief, because it confirmed that he could do it, that he always could have, that no one had ever simply required him to. My paycheck, for the first time since I was 24 years old, was mine. I paid my rent. I paid my car. I bought groceries I actually wanted. I started a retirement account. I booked a long weekend in Savannah because I had always wanted to go and had never allowed myself to spend the money. I walked around that city for 3 days in November sunshine, and I felt extraordinarily, quietly, persistently fine. I think about the hallway sometimes. I think about standing on the other side of that door and hearing my mother's certain voice say she always does. I used to think that moment was the worst thing, the revelation, the confirmation. But I've started to understand it differently. That moment was a gift. It removed the last remaining shadow of doubt. It showed me, in plain language, with no room for interpretation, exactly who I was to them. And it gave me the clean break I would never have allowed myself otherwise. I am not angry at them. That surprises me when I examine it. The anger I expected hasn't settled into something permanent. What replaced it is simpler and harder to articulate, a kind of clarity, an absence of fog, the feeling of finally knowing exactly where you stand, even when where you stand turns out to be somewhere you have to leave. I do not know what the future looks like with my family. Maybe one day one of them calls and means it. Maybe they don't. I have stopped building my life around either possibility. What I know is this. I have Diane, who shows up with chicken stew and no hidden bill. I have friends I had been too exhausted to maintain, who I've been slowly finding my way back to. I have a savings account that grows quietly every month. I have a cat who sits on my lap while I watch television on Thursday nights and expects nothing from me that I haven't already offered freely. I have a life that belongs to me, entirely and without negotiation. And for the first time in 7 years, I am not afraid to spend it.